Welcome to the Lee Library. I'm delighted to present you with a wonderful exhibit that was created by John Felton and Marty Gottron. And John Felton is a bird photographer, and Marty is a quilter, and her specialty with this exhibit is birds. And John has been a lifelong photographer and has a great interest in bird photography in the past few years. And he's very interested not only in educating us, but interested in bird conservation. And John is going to tell you about some of his favorite birds. And Marty has been a quilter since she's been a teenager. And she's done some wonderful work. Some of it you've seen in our past exhibits. And she's done quilts to go along with some of John's bird pictures. So we want to welcome you, and we hope you enjoy the show. It's quite a unique collection to have birds and quilts together. And so we welcome you.
This exhibit shows about 40 of my very favorite pictures that I've taken of birds over the last 7 or 8 years. And one of the early ones actually was this picture of white pelicans, American white pelicans, down in Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida. And we go there basically once a year in December or January. And I just happened to see these pelicans all lined up in this one landing. It just seemed to be a really lovely photograph, so I'm really happy with this one.
So when John was taking pictures actually in Florida one year, I decided it would be fun to try to do quilts based on his photos. And this is the first one I did, I think. It's a yellow-crowned night heron, and you can see that it is, the picture I took it from is right there, and it looks pretty much the same with a little fanciful fabric in it. It's fun to figure out how to find the patterns in the fabric that make it look like the picture. It's kind of, it can be a challenge at times.
Down at the bottom we have the featured picture is, the featured bird is a yellow-crowned night heron. This is an adult, and the picture was taken early in the morning in the fog, so it's a very moody sort of scene there. And the bird above it is a juvenile yellow-crowned night heron, actually taken pretty much in the same place. And I really love the look on this heron's face as he's looking back toward the viewer. And to the left is one of my very favorite pictures I've ever taken. This is of a green heron at Bean Hill Road Marsh in Stockbridge. And this heron had just finished eating a fish, and when all herons really finish getting a fish down their gullet, they fluff out all their feathers in excitement, and that's what this picture shows.
This is a green heron. It's obviously not from the picture that John just showed you. It is from a picture that he took down in Florida. And again, it was trying to find the fabrics and the colors that looked, like the bird, give it some character. I'll let you know what it is, but a little whimsy in it as well.
On the left here we have a great blue heron, which is spends the summer here in the Berkshires. And this heron had just caught a gigantic catfish and was proudly displaying it prior to trying to figure out how he was going to get this giant fish down his throat. We didn't see that happen because he flew off before he ate it. But we got to see him holding this, and this was really a pretty special moment. And the heron to the right, the white heron, is a great egret. And this was taken down in Florida, and I just like the reflection of the bird in the water.
And the quilt is actually from a picture that a friend of ours took. And it's just a silhouette of a blue heron. And it really is just a silhouette with some thread stitching to make the reeds. And I really like it.
4 years ago, Marty and I spent several days at Bosque del Apache National Wildlife Refuge south of Albuquerque in New Mexico. And that's where about 20,000 sandhill cranes spend the winter time. And every morning it was fun to go down there at sunrise and see them come into land in one particular watering hole where they spend the day. And it was great to see them come down with their legs hanging down, kind of like an airplane's landing gear. Okay, this picture is of a cedar waxwing, which is a really beautiful bird that you can see actually in the Berkshires pretty much year-round. Sometimes you see more than other times. And they love berries. And this one just happened to get 2 berries in his mouth at the same time. I was really excited about it. I thought it was a great picture until a friend of mine took a similar picture with one with 3 berries in its mouth. So it's my goal to get that picture someday, maybe 4. So this is a photograph of an eastern meadowlark, which is now a threatened species because they are grassland nesters. They nest in grasslands like the old prairies, and we don't have many of those anymore. Marty and I saw this bird out in Ohio at a former farm that's been turned into a replica of a old-fashioned prairie, and it was raining a little bit that day. The bird popped up on this branch and started singing right in the middle of the rain. So of course it's singing in the rain.
This is Fleur. She's just totally made up. I think I got her off the internet. Whispery was okay. And it was fun to try making something big, and this was a new technique of putting the fabric down. It's basically glued down and then quilted on top of it. And you can get layers of fabric so you can do a little bit more shading and play around a little bit more with what you're doing. And she just turned out to be fun.
The top left photo is of 4 birds called common redpolls, which occasionally, they're like the little finches, and they occasionally come here to the Berkshires in the wintertime, and this was several years ago when a whole flock of them spent the entire winter, a good bit of the winter, at Taft Farms in Great Barrington. And I was really fortunate to be up very close to these birds, see a little bit of snow on some of the flowers, and they were just really they're beautiful birds. And I really just love the effect of this photo. The bird below it is a bird called an eastern wood pewee, and it's one of the birds that says its name. It sings out pee-oo-wee, pee-oo-wee. It's a little teeny bird it's a little flycatcher, and this one happened to be talking very happily one afternoon when I took this photo. Okay, and the bird at the upper right here is a white-throated sparrow, which is a very common bird here in the summertime, this time of year, and into the winter. Really one of the most beautiful sparrows we have. This photo was taken up in Vermont at a wildlife refuge. And down below is a bird of only 2 colors, but in spite of only having being colored black and white, it's a really beautiful bird, I think. It's called the black and white warbler, and it spends its summer here in the Berkshires.
The quilt is a wood duck. It's actually the photo John took in Central Park, and it was a very funny light. The sunlight was very funny, and the bird is not normally these colors. You'll see above it, John will talk about it in a minute, what a wood duck really looks like. But it's a male. He's absolutely gorgeous. And it was fun to do him in colors he isn't, as I said, isn't normally seen in.
So this is a male wood duck, and this was taken at a local marsh in Stockbridge. And what's interesting about this bird is that it looks like he has a plastic helmet on, but that's not plastic. Those are his real feathers. The wood duck is our most beautiful, actually the most beautiful duck in North America. This photo shows 2 wood ducklings. They are very young. They're probably just a few days old, and I caught these at a marsh in Stockbridge, and they just happen to be facing in the opposite directions, and I really like the mood there. This is a bird known as a common gallinule. It used to be known as a moorhen, and you see the adult on the right with the red beak feeding a little baby that is probably not more than a few days old, and this is a sight you don't get to see that often. This is a marsh bird that's hard to find. This photo here is one of my very favorite pictures. It is of 2 baby like a day or 2 old Virginia rail chicks. Virginia rail is a very elusive bird that lives in marshes. They're very hard to see. I just happened to see this family. I saw 4 of them, and this photo has 2 of them one day, and I also saw the mom feeding the 2 chicks. So this is a bird that I call a cotton ball on toothpicks, and it's about the size of a cotton ball. It's a piping plover, and piping plovers are endangered birds because they nest on beaches, and we know that beaches are no longer places for birds to be nesting, but they've been doing that for eons. They're still doing it, and we saw this baby down in Connecticut, on the shore of Connecticut.
The photo is of a marbled godwit. It's a shorebird, that we saw in St. Petersburg in Florida. And I was really fascinated by the feathers on the bird, and so I tried to capture that. In the quilt, I've not ever counted, but there are 6 or 7 or 8, maybe 10 different fabrics that make up those feathers, and it was kind of fun to find the things the designs in the fabric that looked a little bit like feathers. I had a horrible time doing the beigey part. I did something, I didn't like it, I put the whole thing aside for several months, and I came back one morning and just put it together and took that off and put the new stuff on in about 5 minutes, and I've been pretty pleased with it. The background was also fun to put together. It's actually 2 pieces of fabric, one sewn on top of glued and then sewn on top of the other one. So I was pleased with this one.
So 7 years ago, Marty and I spent several months in New Zealand. This was before we really got into birding, but we did spend one afternoon at a gannet colony where they have about 20,000 gannets, which are seabirds that fly over the seas all winter long, looking for fish. And this is an adult, one of the adults, and immediately behind it is one of the juveniles, which is actually bigger than the adult, which is fairly common in many bird species. And I took this picture. I was about maybe 10 feet away from him. And the bird immediately below it is a Eurasian curlew, which is another shorebird. This was taken in Scotland last year, September 2022. It's a really beautiful bird with a really long bill. And this bird is known as a black-necked stilt. It's hard to see the black neck too much on this, but you can easily see why it's called a stilt, because it has this really long pink legs. And it's a shorebird that wanders around looking for food underneath the surface, but it can wade into water that's several inches deep. This photo, I just really love this picture of 2 Canada geese taken at Canoe Meadows in Pittsfield several years ago, and the one goose appears to be behind a bale of hay, which is actually not hay, but it's in the water, and I just really like the funny aspect of this picture. And the bird in the middle here is an American oyster catcher. Took this photo in Connecticut a few years ago. They're really beautiful birds with these incredibly long, powerful red bills. They can break open a clam, an oyster, which is what their name comes from, without any trouble. This bird is called an American bittern, and it's a bird that breeds in the marshes. This was taken at a marsh in Washington State, south of Puget Sound, and I was standing on a kind of a boardwalk platform, maybe 20 or 30 feet above the bird. He didn't even know I was there. But they are really hard to see because they hide in the marshes. Okay, up here we have a bird in a very surprise setting. This is a snowy owl, which usually spends its life in the Arctic, the high Arctic. But a couple winters ago, this owl happened to spend several weeks in downtown Pittsfield. It stayed on several office buildings, including the roof of our former accountant's office, our accountant's former office in Pittsfield. And a few birders knew about it, but basically the state people tried to keep it quiet because they didn't want people disturbing the bird. And I happened to see it one day and got this photograph of it. This is a very small owl called an eastern screech owl. And we saw this at a marsh where we go fairly often in Ohio called McGee Marsh. And this bird was about 70 feet up in a tree. And we knew about it only because other people had seen it and told us where it was. And I was able to get this photograph that makes it look like I was right next to it, but I wasn't. I was way down below it. This photo shows a short-eared owl, which is actually one of the few owls that hunts during the daytime. And we were at Parker River National Wildlife Refuge north of Boston one March afternoon and saw this bird flying over the fields. And so I took some photos, and afterwards I realized it had something in its mouth. Well, it had a mouse or a vole or some sort, so that was its dinner time. So here I have 3 warblers, which are really beautiful birds that eat insects and spend the summers here in North America. They spend their winters in South America, Central America. And the one on top is called a prothonotary warbler. Many people call it the jewel of the forest because it's such a bright yellow. And they do live in deep forests, actually in marshy forests, but they lighten everything up. So this is a beautiful warbler called the magnolia warbler. This was taken at McGee Marsh in Ohio that I mentioned earlier. I love, it's got the yellow and the gray, but he has a splash of black down his belly. He's just one of the prettiest of all the warblers. The yellow warbler is one of my very favorite warblers for two reasons. One is they're really beautiful, and the other is, as a photographer, they're easy to pick out because they're so yellow, they're so bright, and they stand out in the trees. And they also, unlike most other warblers, they also will occasionally pose for you. Warblers tend to flit around in the trees looking for insects, which is their main what they live on. And some people want to know, why are the warblers, the really beautiful warblers, males? And the reason is that males need to attract the females for mating purposes. So in most species of birds, not all, but in most species of bird, the male are the more colorful. So everybody knows about this bird, although many people have never seen one. This is a bald eagle, an adult bald eagle, and I took a picture of this one in December over Stockbridge Bowl. You don't get to see them this close up. He was actually right overhead of me, flying over the lake. The osprey is also known as a fishhawk because it's a species of bird that lives on only one thing, and that's fish. They are expert fishermen, and this one had just flown in and just caught a fish at Laurel Lake and was flying off, and I was so excited just to get a picture of it. So one thing that ties these three birds together, other than the fact that they're all birds known as raptors, is that they were all endangered birds up until maybe 50, 60 years ago, when we started cleaning up the environment. They were all endangered by consuming fish and other things that were infected with DDT, which destroyed their eggs. And so the population of all three of these birds declined. And the peregrine falcon was one of them. All three of them are now coming back, and now not as strong as ever, but stronger than they have been for many, many decades. The peregrine falcon is a bird that hunts and eats other birds. And it's famous because it's the fastest animal on the planet. When it gets into one of its dives, it's been recorded of flying at 200 miles an hour. So this is another bird that was endangered until a few years ago. In Britain especially, this is known as a red kite. It's a small raptor. It lives off on carrion, really, kind of like a turkey vulture does. But red kites had disappeared from Britain, and they were reintroduced from Eastern Europe maybe 10 or 20 years ago, and they're now thriving. I took this picture in Scotland last September. So I love the comical look of this woodpecker, which is known as the acorn woodpecker, because it grabs acorns and deposits them in little holes that it knocks in trees. And sometimes you can see a tree with just dozens of little holes with the acorns in them. So finally we come to Woody the woodpecker. This is what's known as a pileated woodpecker. It's our largest woodpecker that we have in this part of the country. It's a really gorgeous bird, and it makes a really loud thwack with its giant bill.
I want to thank John and Marty for this wonderful show, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And I want to thank CTSB for recording it and the Lee Library for hosting. Thank you again.